Tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
I'm Maul.
And I'm Pops.
And welcome to our NFL Draft post episode. The NFL schedule just got released, so we're a few weeks after the draft. It's the first time we get all the boys on in order to talk about the draft. What we're going to do, we'll just sort of give like general topics, or we'll probably tag somewhere in between, just randomly, sort of our top and bottom three. I'll let each of the guys sort of talk about the biggest hits and misses. I can already tell you that Michael Penix Jr. is probably going to be a topic of discussion.
Can I pick the Falcons for worst for all three spots?
Yeah.
No, we got to get the Broncos in there somewhere.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun this episode with the draft. But before we get into it, past and present, but it's just past. I got two players that went later in the draft, one offense, one defense, that both of you guys saw play. So I think that it's a little bit more fair in terms of trying to get the players. One went to a recognizable school, the other one didn't. But I think both players should be, a little bit of a softball. First guy went to Stanford, played for Seattle, the 49ers, and the Buccaneers. Nope. You're on the right side of the ball with defense, but I don't think Lynch ever played for Seattle.
No, it didn't.
Yes, there.
This guy played under
Stanford. Or I'm sorry, you said Stanford. Richard Sherman.
Yeah, Richard Sherman.
I was like, yes, you got the school.
Stanford.
Correct. You listened. Yep, Richard Sherman. I wanted to pull him out because Harbaugh sort of like trashed him, I guess, in the whole draft process, and like Richard Sherman never forgave him. And then, he did well in Seattle. Didn't do well in San Francisco and Tampa Bay outside of, I think, the drunk driving that he got pretty good at.
I really thought Richard Sherman was kind of like the first of the bigger corners. Corner has kind of historically been like a dude that's like 5'10", 195 that can't catch. Like somebody who probably should have played receiver but couldn't catch, so he played DB. And I feel like Richard Sherman was kind of like the first like big dude in modern history that played corner, and it just gave a lot of people fits. But he was kind of one. He obviously was like a very you either loved him or hated him kind of guy. He never traveled with the number one guys. There was a lot of things that like I don't think he was all that talented for the hype that he got for probably being the number one corner for probably a couple years. But I think it was just because it was like the new people didn't know how to throw around a big corner.
It also helped when you had Cam Chancellor. Who was that other
Adams.
safety?
Jamal
No,
Adams.
not Jamal Adams. Thomas.
Earl Thomas.
Earl Thomas. I forget. I don't even know who the other corner was. I know they had some good ones, and you had the middle linebacker Bobby Wagner.
Oh, yeah. Legion of Boom.
Yeah, they were good. So he was not a star all by himself, sort of like Darrelle Revis was on the Jets. All right, other guy. So this guy's offense. The school's probably going to give it away if you know. But Central Michigan was the school.
Antonio?
Played for the... Dang it. Well, you got it. Played for the Steelers. Didn't play for the Raiders, so I was going to leave that one out there. That was going to be the trick. And Patriots and Bucks. But yeah.
You should have said he was a cheerleader for the Bucks at one point.
I was going to try to like come up with, instead of saying Central Michigan, I was going to go CT University, but that also would have gave it away.
Yeah.
With his antics. He was he went late, but God, like, I think it was either me or Pops or me and you, Maul. I don't think it was all three of us at the same time. Like, I think people forget how good that dude was.
Oh, I mean, so dominant.
Him and Big Ben, like, they just did not miss. Like,
the records that he put up in fantasy, like, he has like Tiger Woods type records for like fantasy stuff, as far as like consecutive years being, you know, the top wide receiver, not like just in the top 5, like top wide receiver, and then, you know, points scored. Like he has like all these crazy different records because of how good he was. And I think what's more impressive with that run too was that it was like the same time, like you said, Big Ben helps, but it was like Le'Veon Bell was there in the backfield. You know what I mean? Like, and we all know the stats that he was putting up. You know, Le'Veon Bell at one point was like all of the Steelers' offense, but somehow Antonio Brown was also putting up stupid numbers. It was that was an insane roster.
Well, it also helped that Antonio was, you know, Big Ben's only target out there on the outside. But, you know, he was putting up Mike Evans numbers until he wanted to, you know, start chasing the money in his rap career a little bit more.
CTE entered the chat. Like at some point, he went off the rails. When it was almost about the time that he drop kicked that punter from the Browns. Dude, I will never forget that. That stayed on ESPN for weeks when that happened.
Went Captain Insano on him.
Oh my gosh. That was amazing. But some late round guys that I think turn into good picks. I mean, there's so many guys that you can sit back and take a look at and say, hey, these are the guys that miss, which is sort of, I think, the discussion of every NFL draft is you sit back and you talk about, hey, these are the teams that won. Here's the teams that lost. I guess we can just go ahead and get this out of the way. I think all of us, whether the number one, they're somewhere in our top 3, if not the number one, was the mistakes by the Atlanta Falcons. Like, and I don't know which one of you wants to start first on this train of misery, but I'll give it to you guys to hop off.
So before we go, you know, down this rabbit hole, just how I ranked how I kind of ranked each team, I really just put them into like 3 buckets. It was like good, like I think they had a good draft, they either had a bad draft, or I just said meh. And there was a lot in meh. You know, I probably had like 4 or 5 in good, probably 4 or 5 in bad, and then the rest were meh. And it's not so much like that the players themselves were meh, you know, like the Raiders. I think the Raiders was a perfect example. Like, I love Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers is a fantastic addition to really any team. But when you look at like the Raiders draft, and that was their first pick, again, is he a great player? Yeah. But I looked at it from like a standpoint of like, what helps them right now? You know what I mean? Like, can a lot of these guys that get drafted turn into something great later down the road? Sure. But I mean, there's no telling. Nobody knows that. You know what I mean? Like, nobody who watches football knows that these guys are going to be good later down the road, right? You're just hoping that they can make an impact now. So that's kind of how I ranked those. I don't know if you guys did it any differently. So if there's any surprises later on of like, well, why did you rank them this way? That's how I did it.
No, I mean, I think that any draft, you sort of go definitely into those 3 categories. I think that, especially when I looked at it, the Falcons, I think it was just the shock of them picking Penix. Like, especially when it was like you paid Kirk Cousins $180 million for a guy just of what you talked about. Like, in terms of usefulness of the pick, like, could Penix be something in 3 years? Yeah, but like, what you're saying is the Falcons are built to win a Super Bowl now. Like, we didn't need a defensive player. Like,
yeah,
that blew my mind.
My big thing with the Falcons is that either you pay Kirk Cousins or you draft Penix later, right? Like there was so many things wrong with that pick. And again, it's nothing against Michael Penix. I think he'll be a fine backup for a while, and then he has at least enough talent to start on somebody's team. I mean, T-Law, Daniel Jones are getting paid millions. Like, Penix can play. Like, let's just put that to bed right now. But like, I mean, like you said, like, you just paid Kirk Cousins, right? So like, if you're gonna do that, that needs to be your focus. For them to say like, oh, well, you know, we want to have a backup for the future, that's fine. Like, draft that dude in the 4th round then. You know what I mean? Like, why waste that number 1 pick? Or like, I wouldn't have said that he should have been their guy, but if that was their guy, like if they were like, oh, we really want Penix, we think he's our future, also fine. Like, if that's your analysis, fine. but then why did you go get Kirk Cousins? Like, I don't understand why they did both. You know what I mean? Like, either one of them separately is a fine decision. Both of them together is what makes it so stupid.
I just love what happened when we were all watching it. We were all, geographically, away from one another, but it was like we all texted each other at the same exact time. It was like, what just happened? Like this makes absolutely no sense. And then, like, to follow up, like Denver moving up to 11 or 12, whichever one they did after the Vikings, we're like, oh, well, we know who they're taking. Like it was just so, like you were saying, Maul, it was one or the other. And to pile on to that, you think about all the 5th-year option dudes that are getting turned down this year. Like, I got it. Zach Wilson isn't that guy. Fields from Georgia, like, he could be a suitable backup. Like, copy, he's going to go out, learn from Russ. But, like, he still would have been available had they moved in the direction of building under Kirk and trying to get, not even if he wanted Dallas Turner or, Jared Verse or one of those big name studs on the defensive line to try to help build that defense.
I think that we weren't the only ones saying, hey, what just happened? Because when the owner went down there and was like talking to the G, like you could tell that was a conversation that he was like, hey, I'm not trying to be this owner that gets in your chili, but even I know that this didn't make sense. So why don't you explain it to me?
He's like, am I confused, or did I just not write a check to another QB for $300 million? Like,
yeah, just
which, again, like, I don't think, I mean, you guys tell me, like, going into the draft, I didn't think Penix was a first-round target.
I saw him maybe late, but that was at best.
This is just me.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, like, even it, like, I think they could have got him in the 2nd round, maybe even the 3rd. Now, the way the draft went, right, and this could be a good transition to probably our second of the top 3 bads, is like quarterbacks were just flying off the board. I think through the first 12 picks, it was like 6 of them were QBs, right? So, like, Penix being one of them, but maybe that's what they thought. Maybe they knew there was going to be a run on quarterbacks, and they're like, well, we got to get this guy. But again, it was like, you already paid Kirk Cousins, so why they do it? And again, I think they could have got him in the 2nd round or maybe even the 3rd round. Like, I don't think anybody was like really racing up to get Penix.
And the thing that scares me about the whole Penix deal is look how long my man was in college. I mean, kind of the same thing with Jaden Daniels. Like, look how long these dudes were in college. And Bo Nix, with the COVID years built in there. Like, before they get an opportunity to start, Penix is going to be like 27 years old before he even gets that opportunity to line up as QB1. And it's just like, you're so old that you lost those prime years that we needed for your development, and you wasted them in college.
And for anyone listening, I mean, it's literally like saying, can you imagine being 22 years old playing high school football?
Yeah.
Like, you would at least, by any means, you should be the best player on the team. Like, you've had 6 years of experience to get there. I sit back and I look at the quarterback. For me, the only one that I thought was first round was Caleb Williams. Just from like arm talent, what he's done on the field. I get he's had off games against top 25 talent, but I think that when you watch this film, he was a guy that you're like, yo, dude, this guy can throw the football. The national championship game, I watched Penix overthrow one of the top receivers in the draft in Rome Odunze on a 4th and 15 when it was like, you got to have it. Like, first half, dude was wide open and you overthrew him. And I know that's just one throw, but it's like, you know what? I really don't see Mahomes miss those. Like, I don't see Burrow miss those. Like, those missing that type of stuff and then reaching for that guy to be like, hey, this is our guy. Like, when you just, same with JJ, same with Bo Nix, it's like, when you take a guy in the 1st round, what you're saying is this is the guy that I'm betting my career on as the GM.
Yeah, there's just so many things wrong with that pick, and it's not against Penix. Some of it is kind of, uncontrollable to him, but like you said, he's already kind of old, right? Like, one of the justifications was like, well, Kirk's getting up there in age, and it's like, well, yeah, so is Penix, and his career hasn't even started, right? And then the other argument's like, well, Kirk's coming off of an injury, and it's like, Penix is literally like Mr. Glass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's gotten hurt so many times, right? Like, there's nothing that you can say about Kirk that like could justify picking a quarterback that like Penix doesn't also fall into that same category, and he hasn't even started his career yet.
Yeah. Cousins is on his third team and Penix is on his third ACL.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, goodness.
You sit back and I thought the point that I forget which one of you guys said it, but it was like, dude, there had been no defensive guys taken off the board at that point. It was like Atlanta needs a defensive guy. It's like you had your pick of the litter. Like you could have picked anyone on defense, and instead you went with a guy that it's like he's not going to touch the field unless Kirk Cousins gets on, which that for me is like an owner. Like if we get into week 3 and I saw the schedule came out and the Falcons play the Chiefs, and it's like, you know, if Mahomes is just lighting them up here in the bins and they don't have a defensive end guy, if I'm the owner, I'm like, oh, so that's what we needed, and we could have had it, and we just didn't draft it. We have a guy on the bench who looks great, and Black sitting there, but it's just to me it's unforgivable.
No, dude, it felt like a fantasy draft at one point. You're just like, what's happening? Like, is this real football?
Well,
Facts.
I will say, like, that pick alone, like, destroyed the rest of what they did. But we saw what Raheem Morris was doing, you know, in LA with the defense that nobody thought was going to be that good, because it seemed like at a time all they had was Aaron Donald the last couple of years. And, you know, Raheem was still able to bring in some guys and make some moves. And if you look at their last bit of draft, they had a running back, a wide receiver, and the rest of the dudes are defenders, you know, a mix of linemen, linebackers, and DBs. So I do think Raheem got his guys that he wanted to a point. But yeah, I definitely think, you know, Jared Verse or, you know, Dallas Turner would obviously been the pick that all of us in the world thought they were going to take.
We'll move on from the Falcons since I think we took enough time on them. But who else do you got in your top bad 3?
Dude, I think it goes back to, you know, we were talking about with the Broncos. It's like, what is Sean Payton seriously doing in that seat? Like, he must have something against Denver that we don't know, or maybe he has this grand elaborate plan that none of us are able to see the end of, because you look at that quarterback room right now, and they just got rid of DiNucci, but it's just like the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah.
Like, they're all the same dude. Like,
Dude.
What are we doing?
Dutch and I were texting one of our buddies, and he's a Broncos fan, and he was talking about like, hey, you guys are the one with the podcast, like, what do you guys think about the Bo Nix pick? And, you know, Dutch obviously just was like, it was terrible, blah, blah, blah. And my comeback, I thought was, I'm going to toot my own horn here. It was great. Because at first I was just like, you know, hey, dude, they had to fix that quarterback room. Like, it's a bad quarterback room. They had to get somebody to fix that quarterback room. And then I waited just a little bit, and then I sent another text message that said, and they failed. Because I mean, like, they need a quarterback, but again, it's just one of those, like, you're reaching for something that's not there. I mean, this is like the equivalent of signing Daniel Jones to that huge contract. Like, you want to have that franchise guy, but it's just because he's your guy now does not mean he is that guy. Like, I don't hate Bo Nix. Like, they could probably have got Bo Nix later, or, you know, they could have tried to get a quarterback later if someone did take Bo Nix, but like, it's just such a high draft pick for someone that's not going to bring that much to your team. And like, for you to waste that much draft capital, and it's tough because, like, the team's already in shambles, right? It's not like they were really going to pick anybody that was going to come in and all of a sudden turn them around. They need too many pieces. But now you're like, and you don't even have a good quarterback now. So it's just, you could have gotten somebody that wasn't sexy as far as like a defensive player or somebody like that would have just, from a longevity standpoint, done your team a lot more favors than Bo Nix.
And I don't think it helps their matter at all either that they picked up Bo Nix, number 1 receiver, in Franklin, you know, to bring him to the team as well. So, like, Bo has one of his guys, but it's just like, you know, that could have been potential, you know, somebody different, because that was their third pick of the draft, they decided to go pick up Bo Nix's favorite target. And it's just like, you know, a lot of question marks around what they're doing. They ended up getting a cornerback out of Missouri, which I thought was probably their best pick, or late in the 5th round as well. They were able to pick up the running back from Notre Dame. I mean, that dude was a pound for pound dude. I don't feel like he was used well enough at Notre Dame. The big buff, I think Estime is his name or whatever.
Yeah, Estime. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll sit back. I'll throw my spears in. I could go in the paint on Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy with the Vikings. One of the teams, this is one of the top 3 for me that wasn't those teams, was Miami for a bad team, because I just didn't like them picking Chop Robson like at edge. It's like you needed offensive line help. Tua has shown to be the weak link in terms of like health. And you have Bradley Chubb, you have Phillips. I get both of those guys are coming off injuries, but it was like I don't see Chop like just coming in and immediately starting for the Dolphins, and they need it secondary help. They need it linebacker help. They other positions need it filled, especially defensive tackle. You lose Christian Wilkins.
Yeah.
And it was just like they do that, and then in the 4th round they take a running back, of which they don't need. They took 2 wide receivers in the 6th and the 7th, and I just sort of sit back, and it's like you signed Odell, you have Tyreek, you have Waddle, and it's like they just took a bunch of offensive guys. They did take an offensive tackle, of which they didn't need. They need a guard. Like that's the positions that they lost in a center. That was super frustrating for me, just watching them, in my opinion, sort of set 2 up for failure. It's like, yeah, you got a bunch of offensive positions, but no one's blocking for you. So good luck. That's how for me, that was a bad pick for the Dolphins. I don't know who made that.
Were your other 2 the Falcons and the Broncos though?
In my other one, surprisingly, was the Packers. And it's because I sit back and the Packers are a team that for me, I look at and I go, hey, you're really close to beating the Niners. Like, honestly, you had them on the rope for a kid that was starting his first one. They take an offensive lineman, Travis Glover, out of Arizona, of which, it's one of those ones that I get. This is sort of like me. I don't want to say praising Mel Kiper, but it's more the praise of he was a completely unknown Glover. Like they had so many other guys out there that they could have picked that were a little bit more highly touted, and you take this guy, and then they take another offensive lineman, then they take the running back from USC, Lloyd, who he's a good player, but it's like you got Josh Jacobs. It's like they didn't draft a wide receiver in the draft. That's like what kills me. Like Love needs help. Like get him guys that can catch the football. Like that drove me crazy.
They've needed help at receiver since Rodgers was there.
Yeah. And it seems to be this like common trend with the Packers that it's like, I think that Love's probably their guy. He showed it last year that it's like, hey, he showed a lot of signs that I think that he's going to be good in the long term, but then you don't get him any help. And it's like, you were so close to beating the NFC champions last year in San Francisco. You would think that you would surround him. I just didn't see that. So that was my big 3 for different reasons. I didn't want to just go hard in the paint on all the teams that overreach for a quarterback at the top of the draft. So that was my bottom 3.
Yeah, so my other third, because we already talked about the Broncos and the Falcons, my third was the Bills, primarily because they just traded themselves out of the first round and then picked up a guy in the second that was worse than what they could have just got there in the first round. You know what I mean? Like they got Keon Coleman from Florida State, which again, I don't think is like a bad pick, but at the time, I mean, they could have got a couple other different wide receivers that I think are better than Keon Coleman. And as far as their compensation for those picks, like there was nothing spectacular really that came out of those picks. And the rest of their draft, again, if you look at it, there's nothing that stands out. And it's not that the rest of their draft was really that bad. It was primarily just because they traded themselves out of the first round for really no reason. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to get like some really good compensation, or like, I'll say this, like we've talked about, like if you think you can win now, which the Bills have proven time and time again that they can't, they need help. And they're losing Gabe Davis. They lost Stephon Diggs. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they needed a wide receiver. So like, why trade back and get like the third best one? Why wouldn't you just take the best available wide receiver at the time? You know what I mean?
100%. And because the Bills, to me, when you're like explaining their decision matrix, to me, the Panthers fell into the same thing, because it was nothing against Leggett, the kid out of South Carolina, but it was more like you traded up into the first round to get him. Like, no one had that dude on their board.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when Xavier Worthy torches the Bills in the AFC Championship next year, you know what I mean? They're gonna just be like, "Why did we take that guy?" Like that's what I'm envisioning when the Bills traded back out of the first round and then took someone that wasn't as good as who they could have just got right then and there. Like that to me was just like, dude. And then again, it's not like what they use those picks for that they got really are like, oh well, at least they got that guy. Again, it's nothing against those players, but like I just don't see them doing anything for the Bills right now, and the Bills definitely need help if they want to try to win the AFC. You know what I mean? Like Josh Allen is only going to be around for so much longer, and they have to climb the Mahomes mountain, and they're not going to do that by trading out of the first round. That just doesn't make any sense.
And not just, I think what you just said though is a prime thing. Like, who are they trying to beat? The Chiefs. Who'd you trade the pick to? The Chiefs. You made that team better. Like
you couldn't have scripted something that stupid. Like that's like an NFL movie of like, oh, they passed on that guy, and now he's gonna end up being the one that beats them, to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it just, I sit back and the teams that, I guess that's the best way I could sum it up, that more times than not, the teams that really have needs fail to address them in the draft, like efficiently. And you just sort of sit back and you're like, I feel like all us as fans are like, hey, I sort of feel like I could run an NFL franchise better than you guys right now, just because I, at least from a fan perspective, can look at and be like, you need a wide receiver. Like, I would take a couple different guys. And because like the Panthers, to me, and maybe I'm wrong on this, I felt like they took him because he's right down the road in South Carolina. Like, I feel like that's a Tepper move. Like, this is the guy that he saw the most on his TV on Saturday. So he's like, that's our guy. And it's just like, I can see, like, he's the hometown kid. I think he'll sell some jerseys, I just have a good feeling about it. When Adonis Mitchell and other guys were up.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
But Pops had to check off, had a family emergency, so he'll get back to us. Let's flip it around. Good drafts. For me, I think the Bears had a good draft.
Dude, it's like, I mean, it sounds like cliche, or I guess like so expected because they're the number one pick, but they had things fall to them, like Rome. I didn't think Rome was still going to be there. You know what I mean? And like all of a sudden, dude, just their first round, you're like, yeah, they're in the top 3. You know what I mean? Like after pick 9, you're like, the Bears are nailing it.
Especially when the context comes in of like the off season.
Yes, it's like what they've done in the off season.
Yeah,
it set that draft up to like, dude, you've literally got the world at your fingertips. So, I mean, I know Pops is on the same page. He's so excited about them, but I don't have them as my number 1. I think I maybe have them as like 2, but it's hard not to just like immediately go, yeah, the Bears scored.
Yeah, go ahead.
My last thought, I was going to say, it's not like they did anything crazy. Like last year, I think the Texans did a few things that were like, oh man, and it was like unexpected. It was like they killed that draft, and obviously this year showed it. The Bears didn't have to do that because they had already done the legwork from the years prior, and it was like, we're sitting at 1-9, and we got the clearly best guy in the draft, and then we got him a weapon. You know what I mean? Like, what else do you need? It was so vanilla, but it was a great draft for them.
And Rome is, he's a top. I think that a lot of people would have said that he was neck and neck with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Neighbors. And honestly, like, I don't want to like throw shade at Marvin Harrison Jr., but I also want to sit back and go, I wonder how he would have been looked without the family name. Like, would we have viewed him as the number one receiver in this year's draft if it wasn't for like the bloodline that came from it? Like, and that's not me trying to like throw him on the, I think he's going to be a very good player for the Cardinals, but it's one of those ones where I just go, I don't think there was a lot of, I think you're cutting very tiny hairs in between those three guys. So for the Bears to be able to scoop up Rome at 9, especially when you look at the fact that he's going to now get to play with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, you got Cole Kmet, you got DeAndre Swift and Everett all on the same team. Like you said this months ago, no first round, no number one quarterback I feel has ever entered a team with as much talent as Caleb Williams is entering right now.
Yeah.
So it's up to him. For me, my number one team was the Steelers. It was unsexy picks, but to me, those were like the best picks. They get offensive tackle Troy Fontenot out of Washington. They get a center, Zach Frazier, in round 2. And then for me, the big one was a guy that won the Butkus Award for the best linebacker in the country. Peyton Wilson falls all the way to round 3, which I just like sit the linebacker out of NC State, which I get he's had a bunch of injuries and that's probably why he fell. But from a standpoint of like, what are the Steelers known for? Linebacker, like having an offensive line. Like you got Russell Wilson help on the O-line. You go out, you get a middle linebacker that was viewed as Dick Butkus as the best before Dick Butkus died. That was his pick for his last given trophy for the Dick Butkus Best Linebacker in America award. I sit back and I look at that and I go, man. The other thing about it was Troy Fontenot. Like, maybe this is just like my soft side, but he grew up a Steelers fan. So like, I just think that sometimes when you do hit those home runs of like the kid that grew up wanting to play for you, you're able to pick him. It's like, I got a feeling the kid's going to come in just like, hey, I'll be here from sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
Like this is my dream, man. So it helps.
I agree that the Steelers killed it. I didn't have them in my top 3, but obviously I had them in the good draft, bracket there for me. They're the one of those teams too that's just like surprise, surprise. The Steelers had a good draft again. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's every year, and you wonder why the Steelers are such a storied franchise and have all these Super Bowls and stuff when, someone like the Cardinals or whatever don't, you know what I mean? It's because of stuff like this. Like, do you win Super Bowls with drafts? Not really, but at the same time, like it doesn't hurt, you know what I mean? And when you're drafting amazing draft classes every year and still having winning records, like that's another thing that's like a bonus to how the Steelers are doing it.
Yeah.
Having a good draft usually is predicated on like where you are in the draft. You know what I mean? But the Steelers have winning records every season. So they're in like, the lower half of the draft most of the time, but somehow they're able to just like pull these drafts out where you're like, man, like you said, sometimes it's not like super sexy, but like, you're just like, dude, they're checking boxes and like the players are solid. Like it's hard to knock them for that. For me, it's a perfect example for one of my picks was the Eagles. Like, and this is a little biased because it's like the Eagles, I think, are already a good team. So I'm kind of using like, again, that whole like, what did they need right now to be good?
Corners.
DBs. And like they got 2 amazing DBs, right? Like, and again, it's maybe I'm getting into the hype of Cooper, but like he's a good DB. The man is talented, and like there's a reason he's the first white corner in 32 years or whatever it is. So, and then you add on Quinyon Mitchell into it, and then you throw in Will Shipley in round 4. Like again, I think they had a really good draft. They addressed what they needed right now. Losing Jason Kelsey is obviously irreplaceable. You're not going to be able to draft someone like Jason Kelsey. So, maybe they could have got What they get round 6, they went and got a interior offensive lineman out of NC State. So, round 5, they got Trevor Keegan out of Michigan. Those are guards, obviously not centers, but the NFL is different. They can transition people, but again, from like their top 4 picks, I think the Eagles nailed it.
I don't know if they're going to move him. Landon Dickerson, their guard who signed a big deal, he's played really well for him out of Alabama, played center at Alabama during the national championship year of 2020. So I sort of sit back. I can easily see him moving over to that position. So I think the Eagles will be fine. The Will Shipley pick was one of my favorites just because I think it was one of those steals because Clemson wasn't good this year. Like he just didn't get hyped. But I mean, he was like the number 1 running back in high school when he went to Clemson, played really well for him. And I think it just adds that guy outside of Saquon that Philly's going to use him. Like if he's good, they're going to give him the ball, and it's a good offset change of pace back from Saquon because Saquon's going to need breaks. They can't just rely on him the whole year.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's a good pick. You want to go with your next one? You want me?
I was torn between my third. I still really haven't picked. The teams are the Chargers and the Rams. The only reason why I'll probably say the Chargers is because it's 2 separate positions. The Rams, the Rams picked the same position, which they needed. Sorry, I'm clicking around here to get my screen up. They needed who they picked, but it was the same position, which again you can't fault them for it. It was a need, but I'll go with the Chargers just because one, I mean, Joe Alt is an absolute freak of nature. I mean, that man is one of those like he's going to be a guy that we're talking about for a long time because he's an absolute freak. And then one of my kind of like what you talked about with Shipley, like I think Ladd McConkey is one of the most underrated dudes in the draft. Like
yes.
It's an easy comparison to say like he's the next Cooper Kupp, because it's like 2 white dudes playing receiver. But like for real, like I think Ladd McConkey, especially, I mean, the Chargers needed wide receiver because they lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, their best receiver basically is the dude out of TCU that they got last year. But like, I think Ladd McConkey is again just one of the most underrated dudes in the draft, and I think he's going to just do so well. Going back to the Rams though, why I thought they did so well: Jared Verse and Braden Fisk is their first 2 picks, and then they follow up with Blake Corum at 3rd. Not that I think that like Blake Corum is going to make that big of a impact just because they've got Williams in the backfield already, Kyron Williams in the backfield, but he's obviously good, right? So I mean, just 3 straight killer picks for the Rams. I thought was amazing. That's why I was so torn between the 2. And I'll give it to the Chargers just because offense is sexier than defense. So
I know that I said this in the chat when they picked him. I love Fisk. Like I said, Fisk is going to be like the new Aaron Donald, and it's because like you watch him, like I think he's very similar. Like I think he's undersized, which Donald was coming out of college, but when you watch how he plays, dude, the dude goes 100% every single play. Like, and no one likes blocking that. Guys love an Albert Hainsworth that will just like fall down on a play and it's like, well, that's all you're getting out of me of this rep. Like that dude's not that. And I think the Rams have shown the tendency to be able to draft really well, especially considering the past few years where I think this was their first round draft pick in like 7 years.
Yeah.
That they've had
a way to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I can't argue with either one of those. For me, the other team that I had, and it's more about meeting the need for who they drafted, was the Lions. Like everyone knew that the Lions had secondary issues. They go out, they get secondary, they go get defense. I like the Lions just from the standpoint of it, like, the Lions haven't missed the last few years. So I sit back and I know that's can go one of two ways. Either they're going to continue to not miss, or they're due to take a hit. I just like the fact that it was like, we have a need. We know that corner sucked. We're going to go fix that problem right now. We're trying to get back to the MC Championship and win.
Can't fault you. I had the Lions in the good category. Again, there was only like 4 or 5 of them that I had up there, and the Lions were one of them. I think they killed it. It was hard to put them over the other couple for me.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's one of those ones that it's great because now that the draft's over, I've already started sort of like, as we did last year, taking a look, and I'm like, all right, so who am I going to pick to finish in these divisional races now? And now I'm like, for sure this year I'm going to stick with my gut, because there's things last year that I changed up, and I know we both did. Did we get some stuff right? 100%. Did we get some stuff wrong? Absolutely. Like, I mean, you're looking at the moron that said the Panthers were going to be the second best team in the NFC South. That didn't happen. Like, it's one of these ones that I do think that there will be some surprises, especially with some teams like, i.e. the Ravens. Like, the Ravens are a good football team. Did the Ravens, I think, address all the needs that they needed to? No, like, they have major offensive line issues.
Had a meh draft, big time meh.
Yeah, and guess what? What's the first game of the season? Ravens Chiefs. Like, we're going to find out. Like, which I get, it's week 1. Now the Lions sort of showed who they were week 1, and it carried on through the rest of the season. I think it's, for the Ravens, it's one of those games where you sort of look at it and you're like, it means way more, sort of like the Lions. It means way more to the Ravens to sort of set the tone for the season than to come out and get swept by the Chiefs going out week 1.
See, I think I would almost disagree with you on that point. I think the Ravens need to lose week 1, because if they come out and they beat the Chiefs week 1, they're going to think like, we just beat the Super Bowl champs. Like, we're it, we are them. And they're going to get cocky, and they're going to just do the standard Ravens things where they're just good all season, but can't finish.
You know about the Ravens or the Cowboys?
Talk about like 15 different teams here. But kind of to the same point, like the Chiefs, this last year, I mean, they were not that good of a team. I know it sounds silly to say because they won the Super Bowl, but like, we said it throughout the whole year that like the Chiefs were kind of different. They weren't like this dominant, just like amazing force all season. Primarily, I think that's how the Lions beat them, because they were so hungry and the Chiefs weren't. I don't think the Chiefs got like insanely better than last year's Super Bowl winning team. I think what won the Chiefs the Super Bowl, obviously Patrick Mahomes, but like, they went on a run there basically right at the end of the season through the playoffs. Like, that was like peak Chiefs football, but they didn't play peak Chiefs football all year long. Like, it was, I mean, we were like week 14 and we were just like, yo, when are the Chiefs going to show up? Like, I remember having those conversations. So like, to me, I think because the Chiefs did win the Super Bowl, I think it's better that the Ravens lose week 1. I know that sounds stupid to say. I'm just saying from like a mindset standpoint, because if they lose week 1, they will maybe get a kick in the pants and be like, yo, that's our competition. We need to step this up and like be hungrier throughout, the rest of the season. I can just see the Ravens, if they win, just like sitting back and thinking like, all right, Lamar's going to win another MVP and then we're going to finally win a Super Bowl. And I don't see that happening, because they didn't address a lot of things that they needed.
The other week 1 matchup that I saw that's a good one is the Jets versus the Niners. Like, I don't know if you saw that clip of that dude that we like, that he does the funny little TikToks.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, come on. And it's like Aaron Rodgers. And like, what? You're just playing the Niners. He goes, you mean playing the same guy who hurt my ankle last year, or my Achilles? And then his Achilles like pops up. It's like, I have a chance to do the funniest thing ever this year.
Yeah, I saw
on Monday Night Football as well. Like,
yeah,
you're just setting it up for Aaron. And because the guy's like, "You're not at MetLife this time." Like, to me, the Jets are sort of this team. I know this is going to lead into the offseason and sort of the predictions. Like, I just sort of feel like the Jets are being seriously slept on in a division of the AFC East that I think got exponentially worse while the Jets get better.
Easily winnable. Yeah.
Like, Patriots, bad. Like, I don't think Drake May's the answer. Dolphins, I think they're going to have offensive line problems. In the Bills, Josh Allen's going to be running for that man's life.
Yeah, Bills got worse. Dolphins, I don't say got worse, but like they definitely didn't get better, you know, and they're not really that big of a threat. And like you said, the Patriots are still kind of rebuilding. Like they're not really a threat at this point. So you're right. I mean, like it's the division for the Jets' division to lose at this point. One little dark horse I want to talk about. I don't know if they're going to be like super relevant right away, but a team that I thought did really well in the draft that I don't think's get enough credit for is the Saints, dude. Talisi Fauga, however you say it, out of Oregon State. I mean, I thought that was a great pick.
Then Kool-Aid.
Then Kool-Aid, and then and again, I don't know how you feel about him, Spencer Rattler, right? Like. I think he gets a lot of bad press from that stupid that high school show he was on or whatever it was. And don't get me wrong, like I thought the same thing. I'm like, this kid's a punk, like blah blah blah, whatever. But like, I thought the dude had some talent. Like Caleb Williams really derailed his career. Like if it wasn't for Caleb Williams, like I think Spencer Rattler's stock is a lot higher than what it is now. And that he's like the perfect pick where they picked him for what the Saints needed. Like I know they got Derek Carr, but like we all know that he's a problem, right? So you wait until round 3 and then you pick this young kid with talent who that can, you know, supersede. Like I think those are 3 really good picks for a team in a division that's like wide open. You know what I mean? Like I think we all would have thought the Falcons are just going to nail it until they picked Penix. And now everybody's like, well, classic NFC South. Like, Panthers suck. Everybody else is mid. Like, we'll see what happens. But, again, and I don't know if the Saints are just going to, like, come out and win the division this next year. But I think the Saints did a really good job drafting and, again, addressing needs and getting good players for you know, where they're at, where they stand.
I need to make a meme for the TikTok for this Derek Carr because it came into my mind just now, and I'm like, you know, that's killer, and I think you'll like it. You remember that it's that Vince Vaughn where he's like, we all need to come together and stop pointing fingers. You're a problem.
You're a problem.
You're a real problem, and that's Derek Carr. Like for that team, for me, Rattler. To go back to that, I know I sent this to you guys in a message in text, and I don't know if it ever got on. To a podcast, if you go watch his game against Tennessee, when Tennessee had beaten Bama 2 years ago, they go into South Carolina. South Carolina's big time underdogs. Watch Spencer that game. The dude played lights out. Was throwing darts.
He's super talented. Again, I'm telling you, like if it wasn't for Caleb Williams, and again, like think about how in like the praise and regard that you just gave Caleb Williams, like he was starting at Oklahoma before Caleb Williams showed up. You know what I mean? Like he was the guy. It sucks when you get beat out by like that level of talent because again, he just goes to the back burner and it's just kind of like everybody kind of forgets about him. He loses the media darling status. But like every time I see that dude play, I'm like, the dude is talented. He definitely has some flaws, and like we'll see if the NFL can mold him into like what they need. But like he gets to sit behind Derek Carr. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to be the starter, number one. And I know we don't think Derek Carr is that good, but we've talked about the importance and the what it can do for your career to just be a backup for a few years to learn the speed of the NFL. And again, I think the Saints nailed it on all fronts from that standpoint.
Yeah, it helps as well when the kid sort of gets humbled in college to where, you know, there's not, as you talked about, there's not the expectation that he's going to play.
Yeah.
So you don't have this immense pressure that Caleb Williams has going to the Bears, because if he comes out and through like the first 3 weeks, he's like 2 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, like Bears fans will be burning, stakes. They're going to, they won't even build a new stadium because they'll just burn it down. Like they'll be incensed. But for him, it's like there is no pressure. Like you're not expected to contribute right now. No one's even expecting you to really be a name. Like I guarantee you, people don't even know what his jersey number is going to be this year. He's just an unwritten guy on the wall. That, given the opportunity, I sit back and I look at it and I go, he'll be on a way better team than he ever was at South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I'm just hoping that the Saints don't do something stupid like Derek Carr just continues to play like Derek Carr, and like week 8 they're just like, Spencer, you're in. Like, because that usually ruins it. You know what I mean? It's pretty much over from that.
You can't throw a kid into the frying pan when he's not ready. So yeah, 100%. And it takes time, like what Andy Reid did with Mahomes. Not saying that Mahomes needed time, but it sure helped. Like,
oh yeah, it always helps. I mean, like we've talked about this before. We've done this episode of just it doesn't even have to be somebody like super good. If you're just sitting behind somebody and learning the speed of the NFL and learning the playbook and getting repetitions with guys, you're going to be better off in a few years than you would be if you just had to come in right away and be the guy.
Yeah. I'll wrap it up with this and I'll let you throw your parting shots with it as well. I want to go back to the Raiders because this to me was one of those ones that I want to sit back and hate the pick, but at the same time I love it just because I think he is sort of that guy that can take over game. But it's more about the quarterback because I wanted to end with your text that you sent today. I think people look at the Raiders, and for me, the Raiders made a good move. Like they take Brock Bowers, they go get some other positions filled. Brock Bowers, to me, we can sit back and argue about, well, you took Mayer from Notre Dame last year at tight end. Like, why do you take this guy? And my argument would be, look at the other team in the division that has what many consider to be the greatest, if not one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, in Kelsey, and how much of a difference he makes. Like, if you can find that guy, dude, it changes a team. But with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, I think a lot of people sort of look down upon him. And I wanted to pull out the stat that you sent today as to why maybe we shouldn't be so hard on Minshew and a little bit more harder on the other guy that I'll compare to. So Gardner Minshew has 59 touchdowns compared to this other starter who has 58. And this is in 2 seasons as a starter. The other guy who I'm talking about's had 3 years as a starter. Gardner Minshew's had 24 interceptions. The other guy, 39. The quarterback rating, Gardner, 90.2. The other guy, 85. Games played, 49-50. Gardner's at 49. The other guy that I'm talking about, who we at, Maul?
T-Law, my man. Oh, mid.
Who knew a mid guy's worth $250 million probably with his next contract?
Right, and that's just like, I mean, I said it in the text. It's just like nobody's even considering. You would be crazy to pay Minshew that much money, which I agree with. But at the same time, like, then why are you going to pay T-Law? Like, this is what we're talking about with the Daniel Jones thing. Like, just because that guy's there doesn't mean you have to pay him. And to your point, like, I don't hate the Brock Bowers pick. Again, I mean, he's a generational, I hate to use that word, but he has generational type talent at a position that is very critical in the league. The thing that about the Raiders, and again, I think Jackson Powers Johnson's a good pickup as well. I like that the Raiders didn't force the quarterback situation. Like,
yes, that's what the bigger story is.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, they could have done just as, they could have been the Broncos and went, oh, we'll take Bo Nix, right? And again, I don't know if I would have been able to make this decision in real time because it's hard to pass up on someone like Brock Bowers. However, where they were sitting and knowing that there were so many teams that needed quarterbacks and were willing to trade up. I mean, like, the Vikings were chomping at the bit to trade up. The Broncos were chomping at the bit to trade up, and they did. I know that Brock Bowers' pick was after both of those guys, but that was because of the other trades that had already happened. I think possibly the Raiders, if they would have acted early enough, could have possibly traded that pick to someone like the Vikings or the Broncos, because that team was just, they needed to just get higher in the draft. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's one of those ones that for me, the reason I bring him up is it's almost a rejoicement of not picking and reaching for the quarterback, that it's like you made your team better with the picks that you got. You get the number one center, you got the number one tight end. It's like if Gardner plays as well as he did last, I mean, Gardner had the Colts in the playoffs. If that running back could just, or maybe if that running back makes the catch, at least we get another set of
They got a
downs for
shot,
Gardner
yeah.
to try to drive him down. But it's like ultimately, from their standpoint, it's like you have a team. Like instead of wasting a number one pick, like you went out and got a guy, like you said, that a lot of people view as like, hey, this is by far the best tight end we've seen in a long time. They went and got him. Like that's a lot better than taking a guy, whether it's Penix, JJ, Bo Nix, any of those guys outside of Caleb Williams. I think that it was a great pick just
Yeah.
because, and that to me is sort of the thing I want to see with the Raiders this year is when all of those other guys turn out sort of like I think they will to not be good. If Brock Bowers is that guy, I think this is one of those times that we'll like look back in the draft and we'll be like, the Raiders did such a good job. Like, yeah. And Mel Kiper will have to eat it because I know he was just like, oh, the Raiders overreached. And I'm just like, you know, you said the same thing last year about the Lions with Jameer Gibbs and Brian Branch. Like, they're like, well, why are these guys doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And it's like, you know, sometimes the best decision is not overreaching, just like you talk about, like with Daniel Jones. Like, there's times where you don't need to pay a guy. The Raiders didn't do it with Jimmy G. They said, see ya. Like, we'll take Gardner Minshew. We'll take a good, at least a backup, if not at times a good starter in the league, who I think that if you just remove the name, sort of like we did, he's better than T-Law. Like, he's played better. I'd like that instead of paying a dude like T-Law all the money that they're going to pay him.
And I know they got Meyer, but I mean, we've seen you could do multiple tight end sets. I mean, Bowers is talented enough. I feel like they could do what we were talking about what the Bills did last year with
Chiefs did it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like you could put Meyer at tight end and put Bowers out in the slot, dude. Like, good luck guarding that guy. You know what I mean? Because the Bills did it with Dalton Kincaid. You know what I mean? Like they were doing that until Dawson Knox got hurt, and then Dalton Kincaid had to play tight end. But like, you get talent on the field, and it's better than just forcing a third round guy to be your quarterback.
That or taking Michael Penix and just having him ride the bench while everybody else makes plays.
What a waste, dude.
Oh my gosh. Well, sorry that Pop's tuned out a little early. That's sort of our NFL draft recap. I know that I've been sort of itching too. I know some future episodes, what we got planned is to do, college football. We need to just talk about it. We haven't talked about it all really this off season. They give a preview going into that, a preview in the NFL. I know we haven't been doing it every week. It's sort of the summer. We got, kids going to Disney World and every other place. So we're making them happen when we can. I still got to Tice it. I have been splitting it because of the audio, but we got about a 3.5 hour rant session coming your guys' way that me and Maul laid down a few weeks ago. They got to get published this week.
We got to get our NIL episode out there as well.
Oh, that may be 4 hours.
Well, we got to film it first.
Oh, dude. I just saw as a splice, and I don't know if you saw it today, that the NCAA is talking about removing walk-ons. Like, you can't have walk-ons anymore, which I'm just like, if you're going to say that you can have as many scholarships as you want, then by all means, go for it. But if you're just going to hurt some poor kid that's like trying to just make the team and be a part of something, like, yet again, the NCAA, like, it's like,
why? Like, what do they target? Like, it's like, we can't control NIL, so let's just like throw a dart over here.
Oh, you see that kid that don't have no legs? Let's pick on him. Like
that poor kid over here.
Every time I look, it's just like, what's the dumbest decision we can make? Go ask the NCAA because they're about to make it. Like, I hope they fold as an organization. Hey, but we haven't even said this since it's happened. Reggie Bush got his Heisman back.
Yes, he did. About damn time.
Dude, and I will leave us with this, at least and I'll let you take it from there. It was great because they started showing Reggie highlights again. I know Pops one time, you weren't on, and I wish you were. He was like, I sort of, I could see the argument of why Vince Young should have been the Heisman that year. And I'm like, dude, kick rocks. You cannot turn. I've never seen someone put together outside of like the Rose Bowl game, Vince Young highlights. Reggie Bush that year was the best football player, not just in college, but like in football. Like there was no one that people tuned in more to watch than Reggie Bush that year.
Yeah.
So outside of that, you got anything else?
That's it, man.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Time to pull chalks.